Back to the Hearthstone Masters Tour Los Angeles presented by T-Mobile. This is the grand finals where we will crown a winner after this best of five as the champion of Masters Tour Los Angeles. They will earn $32,000 in change and significantly improve, if not already guarantee, their spot in Hearthstone Grandmasters for the following season. We're still getting in all the information for bans and all of that sort. So in the meantime, let's go ahead and check in with my co-caster, TJ Sanders, who will be wrapping up the show with me. TJ, what's up, bruh?
Hello, Dan. I'm excited for this one. If not for the fact that I didn't think for a very long time we'd see the possibility of a back-to-back Masters Tour champion. That would be Blyze. He just won Arlington a few months ago and looking to do it again, especially just in the last couple series that we've seen from him. He seems to be on fire, not just his play, but also, when your opponent's Reno pyroblast them in the face, you got to be feeling pretty good about your odds and your run through the tournament.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't even a few months ago, TJ. It was 7 weeks ago that he won his last Masters Tour. This guy could already be putting himself as one of the highest earners in Hearthstone, competitive Hearthstone history after this tournament. And you can see that his consistency is continuing to stay strong, which I think is always, I was talking about it with Doa. I always feel like that's a really nice thing when somebody wins and continues to streak afterwards, especially when there's people who kind of like doubt or there's, criticism against the player. Because I feel like that's just like people who kind of miss the forest for the trees. And I think that's something that ultimately is what is a strength of Blyze. It seems like he kind of gets what the lineup should be brought for the tournament, and he has really good reads on the meta. And I think that goes a long way as opposed to, being absolutely technically perfect, which is very hard in a game like Hearthstone. Let's be honest here.
Yeah, it's very difficult. And that's why I was, that much more impressed by it and thought that'd be a long time before we saw that level of success so close together. But I hope you're going up against TNCAnswer, who honestly, I didn't know much about going into this one, just a couple odd things, but he's definitely impressed me with this play. It takes a lot to go through, 9 Swiss rounds and this stacked of a top 8 with a deck that players didn't respect coming into the event, which was Holy Wrath Paladin. And, I think Casey tweeted out, he gained a lot of respect for TNCAnswer over the course of the event, just looking at his plays, and couldn't think of anybody better to lose to going out of it. But you can tell he is credited as a Holy Wrath Paladin expert in the Chinese Hearthstone scene. But other than, some Gold Series victory, which is something to speak of in itself because there's thousands and thousands of players that compete in those, we have not seen much of him.
Yeah, and that's okay because we trust that China's system is very competitive, and I think that's the most important thing that you have to understand is that the players that come through China, they are no slouches. And I really don't think it's a surprise, TJ, that the past couple times that we've seen the Chinese who have played grueling qualifiers to get to where they are, they've done very well in our tournaments. We didn't get to see them in Masters Tours Arlington, which was the first major tournament after BlizzCon 2019, largely because they were ahead of the curve, and they said instead of jeopardizing health and consequently lives, we're going to stay in China. And that was really crushing for people like Lion and Xiaoti and all those other players that really want to come from China over. Lion was even messaging me saying that she really wanted to come to Arlington, hang out, and get to meet all the other Grandmasters. So it was a big bummer that China couldn't compete in Arlington, and it looked kind of be the same case here for Los Angeles. However, that is one of the nice things. Hearthstone is a game where latency and ping matters the most compared to other games, and I think that's as a result really nice to see the Chinese players get that opportunity and deliver on it. That they're not just one-time flukes. This region is seriously very strong. I think it's time that we stop underestimating them simply because of past performances.
Yeah, definitely agreed. And I think, TNCAnswer specifically, I love the fact that he's bringing, something a bit offbeat, something a little bit off meta. And if you want to go even further than that, a couple things that are a little off meta. So curious to see how he'll be able to match up against Blyze. Blyze, one of the players who going into this tournament, valued Priest and not like Quest Resurrect Priest or whatever, what have you, that you see on ladder more times. It's the Combo Priest, and it's been crushing. It's the highest win rate deck by far. Um, in the like Swiss portion all the way up until this point with about 56% win rate, which is insane considering one, its sample size, and two, most of the time when we come into Masters Tour events, decks like top out at 52, 53% because of, how high the level of play is. And of course the variance that goes along with it. But Priest has been crushing, end up being a great bring. So I'm excited to see these two matchups line up against each other. And Holy Wrath Paladin versus Combo Priest, Dan, is a throwback to, mid to late way through the year last year, like specifically Grandmaster Season 2. It was a matchup that we saw a good amount.
Yeah. And you kind of mentioned Priest's performance in particular. It's still doing really well in top eight. I mean, clearly the fact that Blythe, one of the two combo Priest players, ended up making it to the finals, clearly getting wins with the Priest despite it not getting banned. So overall, I would say that if you're still looking for decks to climb with, perhaps Priest is a little bit of a risk to bring. Oh, sorry, risk to climb ladder with. But in terms of tournaments, it seems very effective, given that the bans gives it a little bit more breathing room to be able to get those proper matchups against Mage and Druid. In the meantime, we kind of talked a little bit about the combo Priest. I gotta say that the OTK Paladin, the Holy Wrath Paladin that Answer has been another revelation in this tournament. I kind of wrote off Paladin, but like I was talking with Doa, I got a chance to hang out and talk to Justin and Hunter Ace, and Hunter Ace was talking about before this tournament how he really wanted to bring a Holy Wrath Paladin lineup because that's one of the decks that he's practiced the most last year. And we all know how much Casper loves to play complicated combo decks, and something that he excels in particular. And it's kind of nice to see that his line of thought wasn't wrong. Like there is a possibility to play something like that. The only problem was that I think that he was trying to go too fancy because he was considering other decks like Quest Warlock and other shenanigans like that to try to make the lineup more streamlined, as opposed to simply just splashing it in as like a one of the way that Answer has while playing other standard decks.
Yeah, I felt like the big issue when I first, looked at the Holy Wrath Paladin and kind of tried to think critically about it is that it does have a few bad matchups that it has to dodge. Um, we saw how awkward it was when he was playing against Rogue to try and dodge the flick for so long, and he won a game capitalizing on a misplay from Naoki earlier on in the day. But it does seem to do better against other like off meta decks and the decks that do take some ramp up time, which Blyza has a decent mix of, but he also has some things that can go fast like the Combo Priest. So I feel like where that Holy Wrath Paladin lines up is going to be the big deal, and where he's going to target his ban, especially considering like his decks tend to be like have different matchup spreads. He's not trying to target anything specific. So like where he matches up within a series of conquests is going to be pretty crucial to his overall game plan. And if he can sneak a win through with some of the quote unquote weaker decks like Holy Wrath Paladin, maybe not weaker, but just based off what we're accustomed to and based off of the success level of the deck throughout the event, throughout the last couple months.
Yep. So we'll see how that ends up being a X factor on both sides, which you love to see. People, I do respect a lot of the Hearthstone Grandmasters players. Sorry, I respect all the Grandmasters players, and especially their opinions. But I do feel like sometimes it's easy to get into an echo chamber where you practice with really great players and they're all very skilled. But there are some times where it's difficult to zoom out a little bit and look at other things in other decks. And one of the things about preparing for Master Tour Los Angeles compared to Arlington was that players felt like they were forced to bring 4 or 5 different classes, and none of them really talked about Paladin very much, except for a couple that I mentioned. And I think that's like a really cool thing, the fact that people can really defy that. And I think time and time again, it's kind of been shown that if, it's not that Paladin was the thing that everyone should bring. Because if everyone did, then I think that would change dramatically the landscape of how things would shake out. Perhaps other decks would flourish, similar to the way Priest preyed upon Druid and Mage. But at the same time, it just makes you wonder about how many times have we considered options, or rather not considered options that are very good for these kinds of tournaments. And, again, we talk about the stakes here. There's a lot of money on the line, but there's spots in Grandmasters potentially, or follow up people who could get invites back to future Masters tours so that they can improve their chances for Grandmasters. So rest assured, these players are looking for every opportunity to prove themselves, to collect as much cash, and to fight for that glory.
And speaking of trying to earn spots in Grandmasters, I believe with a finals appearance from Blyze, he is locked, guaranteed for promotion for after season one this year of Grandmasters. Because he won an event in a finals appearance, which means the worst he can have finishes is 1 and 2. A-Rock was the player he beat in the finals, who was also a European player in Arlington. Even if A-Rock specifically, would have to be A-Rock, finishes first in the next Masters Tour in this cycle, which would be Sweden, Blazer would still be at the very worst second in total earnings, which means that he is guaranteed promotion. So keep in mind as you're watching this matchup that Blaze will be a Grandmaster later on in the year.
Yep. So here we take a look a little bit closer for people who have kind of been tuning in and out, or maybe perhaps checking out the VODs. But TNCAnswer is going to be playing the Galakrond Rogue, which is anchored by Galakrond the Nightmare. And what a nightmare it is! That Rogue is the most popular class in the tournament, and been able to terrorize the ladder with its very effective swings. Blyche running a very similar Rogue as well. And it's gonna come down to a lot of those tempo swings. What cards will you be able to discount? How are you gonna be fight for? How are you gonna be able to fight for board and utilize every single mana crystal? So we're gonna see what ends up happening in game one. But very quickly, I want to ask TJ: do you consider any X factors for this head-to-head between Blyche and TNCAnswer in terms of the Rogue Mirror?
I honestly don't think so. I think the biggest thing we've seen so far that determines the Rogue Mirrors is Boom Pistol Bully timing. I feel like that because nearly every single card in this deck, specifically lackeys, are Battlecry minions. Even if you use Boom Pistol Bully to interrupt a Galakrond turn, if you have the read that's coming, since Galakrond is a Battlecry card, those types of things allow you to disrupt your opponent's game plan and potentially allow you to just sneak wins. So I feel like that card has pushed Rogue up a little bit. A lot of other decks got extra tools as well with the adventure that came out. Half of it was for Arlington, half of it was after, which was a little bit weird. And I feel like Boom Pistol Bully timing, especially in the mirror, is something to look for when talking about Galakrond Rogue versus Galakrond Rogue.
Yeah, that built bully pistol, the bully pistol, excuse me. The time that card in general, TJ, that card name's eluding me. I don't know why the alliteration is so difficult to say right now. But it's been a very difficult card to time for some players because they have to specifically read their opponent's hand and read the state of the game. And I think that's been a pretty tricky thing about the Boom Pistol Bully. But we'll see how that ends up panning out. We're still getting the first game set up, so apologies for the very long intro. We're kind of putting together this shoestring production at the last minute for all of you, but I appreciate everyone's patience.
Yeah. Also, we traditionally we usually give time for the second semifinalist winner to kind of have a break and look over the deck list for their next opponent. So since Blash just played in the last series, we decided to give him 5-10 minutes to kind of collect his thoughts, look over his strategy for TNCAnswer, and just to make sure that he doesn't feel like he's at a disadvantage for having played second. So that's what we're waiting for, just for the players to kind of ready up and for us to get all the decks and bands and everything squared away for the grand finals.
Yep. Is there anything else that we can talk about in terms of their lineups? Do you like the bands?
The bands Hunter and Priest.
Yes.
Yeah, I feel like Priest was in a good spot against pretty much everything. that TNCAnswer could throw out. I feel like the big ones would be the Druid and the Paladin. Rogue can sneak wins because they can keep the board under control a little bit better early, and they have sap. That's the big one to kind of interrupt things. And Hunter, that's just been BlyZes' strategy, right? He's just banning Hunter. So why not? Why deviate from this point on? But one thing I do want to note, I can't talk either, Dan.
It's tough. Talking is real tough.
One thing that I want to boom pistol bully out there is the fact that we're going to see Hunter being played in a series.
I know. Hunter's been banned nonstop, back and forth. So it's kind of interesting to see how it plays a factor to the series. Also, the idea that Highlander Hunter has made it to the finals. And I believe Highlander Hunter was even more represented in the semifinals because I know Yuki had it as well. So, Highlander Hunter kind of shown that it's got some chops. I think Dragon Hunter kind of stole a little bit of the spotlight because of how prominent it is on ladder. And, people really like to meme it as kind of being like a deck that's a lot simpler to play than others. However, I feel like the Highlander Hunter has still been very versatile in terms of how it's been able to answer threats. Like we've seen some games where it was on the back foot, which is not traditionally how you expect to play the Highlander Hunter deck, but you're still able to threaten lethal through a couple of different spots. And I think it's just one of those things where people just forget how good some of that core Highlander package is and how relevant they can always be in any juncture of the game versus some, when you play like an aggressive Dragon Hunter, if you don't really get going and that momentum to pressure your opponent, you just kind of lose very convincingly. So I appreciate that. And also I like that Highlander Hunter is harder to target. It's not a deck that's easy for people to corner.
Especially since it probably wasn't on a lot of players' radars coming in. Dragon Hunter was I feel like
right.
the deck to always keep in the back of your mind, at least for a ban strategy. And I think that's why we are seeing a lot of ban Hunter strategies. But we will get to see it in this series, potentially, unless BlyZes just gets 3-0'd or 3-1'd and he doesn't play it. But I can't imagine that's going to be the case. I'm hoping for a little bit closer of a series.
Oh, yeah. So here we go. The matchup has started. Rogue versus Rogue. We're going to start things off with BlyZes having that Pharaoh Cat answer a little bit slower, and it's not what you want to see as your opening hand if you're in Answer's position. Being on the play, you want to be able to get faster onto the board compared to your opponents. Finds a Seal of Fate, which you can use on your opponent's life total, which is fun.
Yeah, he didn't have the Seal Fate in hand, so I'm not sure if he would have, if he had it in hand, if he would have poked the Pharaoh Cat, so we could have it like a guaranteed target without having to like take as much damage. But I do like just getting it to the face here. It means he gets a lackey to hopefully get some praise Galacrons down next turn. Just try and get those invokes as quickly as possible. And that's exactly what we're going to see. So his hand got made a lot better by that Seal Fate coming to the top. Otherwise, he would have just had a dagger hit and re-dagger pass, which would have been pretty miserable. But the one thing that he does have is the High Spirit Togbycle in his hand early, which that and Galacron, two of the highest win rate cards when kept in the mulligan, just because that's what those big, rogue, powerful swing turns are based off of.
Yes. Discounted cheap cards into really powerful combo cards like Van Cleef, or being able to just generate a big amount of board for 0 mana is just very, very effective. Answer finds Shadow Step, which incidentally can be a nice way to utilize his lackeys with High Spirit Togwaggle on turn 6. Challenge would be that he still could also consider some other cards like Togwaggle Scheme as well. I don't know if there's ever a case for Cannon Barrage here, TJ. What do you think?
No, I mean, you could get 3 damage for 6 mana. We did see Togwaggle Scheme utilized earlier for Boom Pistol Bully. Nalgidon used the Togwaggle Scheme to shuffle more Boom Pistol Bullies in his deck because he was playing against a Holy Wrath Paladin. He was actually playing against Answer. and it was able to shut off the combo for like 3 turns in a row because he just kept shadow stepping and drawing them. So it does have like these really cool use case scenarios. Also, just the combo that we used to see, the classic combo, right? Heisper and Togwaggle, and shuffle Heisper and Togwaggles into your deck to be able to draw them with the Wonder Swan for free, which was like what the Lackey Rogue was initially when, you know, before Galakrond was out.
Oh, that's right. So, you know, maybe there is an opportunity to see that Togwaggle scheme continue to do well in some of these non-traditional uses, especially when we start considering Boom Pistol Bully. That being said, Blychip putting his own Edwin onto the board. Looks like to be a 6/6 Edwin. Oh, 8/8. It's going to be a very powerful minion to deal with here. Answer does not have a convenient way except for Flick Skyshift, which will incidentally kill his own Van Cleef in this deck.
Maybe a small price to pay for not taking 8 damage recurring.
Yeah.
Also, considering he has Lackey into Heisper and Togwaggle next turn, he wants to make sure that he doesn't have to worry about too threatening of a board, so he can do that safely. Because I think that's really where his this hand's power is going to come from. So I think you got to do it. Of course, you'd love to just ignore this. Faceless Lackey into Heisper and Togwaggle, get the Wondrous Wand, draw 2 of your most powerful minions, and then an Edwin for 0 mana, and make him a 20/20. But I think that's hoping for a little bit too much.
Yeah, on the flip side, you know, what's the downside of playing the Flick Shiv in terms of what can Blychip do immediately? Is there a direct punish right afterwards? I don't know.
He could flick the flick and destroy the flicks.
Okay, so Answer going with a non-conventional response. You know, I was really anticipating Flick Skyshift to come out here, but instead going for Boom Pistol Bully and making it difficult for Blychip to develop afterwards. Blychip trades. Just does not want the Boom Pistol Bully to do anything more, and now we can get the High Spear and Togwaggle. You know, part of me does wonder if Blychip pushed damage there instead of going face. What would this game look like in terms of the landscape of it?
Yeah, he has Leroy in hand and a Kobold Lackey, so his burst is there. I get what he was thinking about. If, like, he assumes that there is no High Spear and Togwaggle, if he doesn't trade, Seal Fate plus just a trade over the Edwin kills it. It kind of gives him a good Seal Fate target, whereas he otherwise may not have had one.
True, but he would have set up 2-turn lethal, I think, because he would have had 18 damage.
Yeah, absolutely.
Lackey.
Yeah, it's a good, you know, point for sure. You know, it's hard to weigh each outcome. It's hard to know what Blyze is thinking. But Answer, I like the fact that he's just willing to take damage.
Well, Answer did get rewarded for that. Oh, and he finds Ziliax to stop the Van Cleef and regain a little bit of life. Can he find something else better?
Oh, well, Blyze has a full hand. So fun. This sap will just destroy the Edwin if he so chooses. He has Flick as a backup option for another big minion if it were to come out. But he also has the Galakrond in hand, which means I believe he is... He played 2 Praise Galakronds and a Seal Fate. So I think he's 1 Invoke away from a fully invoked Galakron. And there it is with the Devoted Maniac.
Interesting. Using Eviscerate instead of the Sap. I kind of anticipated the Eviscerate to be saved to go for face damage in case he wanted to burst him down, but it seems like Answer is going to... He understands that this game might go a lot longer, and instead of trying to save the Eviscerate for face damage, get the guaranteed kill. Blyja is kind of in a weird spot right now. If you use Kronk's just to clear the board, I guess that looks pretty fine to me if you deal damage and clear off the board here, but looks like he's just gonna let that survive, and the sap will allow him to push through, but it doesn't have enough damage, I think, right now.
He could pick up damage. He's got Galakron with the claw, since it's fully invoked. He could also pick up. He needs to dump one more card, right? Yeah, he needs to dump this backstab.
Yes, and he's gonna use it so that way he can draw 4 cards. Looking for a big swing, could find his own Edwin, for example. I think that's probably the biggest reason why he hadn't used Flick Shiv earlier. Finds his own Kronks.
My goodness.
Boom Pistol Bully.
So just straight up damage alone, he would get +2/+2 to all his minions. That'd be +6. So it would be 12, 17, +6, 23?
Is there another way? Maybe the Shield of Galakron gives him a little bit extra damage?
Or Goblin Lackey.
Yeah, the Goblin Lackey.
So that's exactly 24.
Whoa. Answer has a few seconds to pull this off, but looks like Blyche is just going to concede before seeing the 24th point of damage. The confidence of Answer, knowing that he had that exact lethal, Blyche didn't even want to see it. And I think that's going to definitely do some mental damage there, because Blyche looked like he was ready to leave that game. So yeah, Answer off to a very good start, winning that Rogue Mirror. Very crucial, I think.
Yeah, and it was. I feel like there was so many like micro decisions in that game that Answer made that really made the difference. Right, utilizing the Eviscerate for to clear off the Edwin instead of the Sap. Allowed him to have the sap for a bigger target that allowed him to push lethal when he did. Not trying to be, super fancy with the flick, and just kind of developing Boom Pistol Bully to make Blyze have a super weak turn to try and guarantee that he knew what was going to be on the board when he played his High Spear and Togwaggle. So, willingness to take a little bit of damage if necessary, and just a good navigation towards the end there, spotting the lethal.
Yep, so we're going to go into game number 2 with Answer playing the Quest Druid. And we'll see if the Quest Druid can continue to do pretty well, highlighted by Living Dragon Breath, that your minions can't be frozen, which is relevant against the Mage that is left up from Blyche. So even if this Druid drops the next game, which looks like it's up against Blyche's Rogue, who's going to queue it up again, not going to matter too much in the big scheme of things, because he still has that game plan of trying to soft target Mage at the very least. And then Blyche is sticking on this Galakron Rogue, as we saw. A couple of opportunities that I think were missed, or maybe should have been fleshed out a little bit more. And perhaps, Blyche probably swinging the pendulum the opposite direction. We're kind of talking about how he's confident, and that's probably helped him, but perhaps a little bit of overconfidence and playing too fast and rushing things.
Yeah, it's definitely plagued some players, but when people always have the argument about like whether it's instinct or whether you're supposed to analyze every turn completely, sometimes you can end up overanalyzing. Sometimes if you played enough games of Hearthstone and then a matchup inside and out, sometimes it is better to trust your instinct, and that works better for some players, because if they go into the tank and try and think of the absolute 100% correct play, they'll end up overthinking and making a worse play. Casey is a perfect example that comes to mind, since he's been around the scene for so long, since like 2015, 2016. He's played fast forever. He slows down when he needs to, but most of the time he operates off instinct just because he's played so much Hearthstone, and it's worked out for him. I mean, he got top 8 at this event, so he's a Grandmaster.
That's right. So maybe Blyche just kind of playing off that instinct. Sometimes, like you said, it is good to hesitate, but for the most part, people's play styles when it comes to just kind of jamming and slamming things on board, I'm not going to really complain, because I think it's such a different pace than what we're used to. So I'm always down to see how it works out for players. Now we do have TNCAnswer, who has quite possibly like the ideal start. for Request Druid, which is be able to start on the coin and then follow it up with Crystal Merchant into Innervate if he wanted to draw that extra coin, the extra card. But he also decides to hold on to it, TJ. So, that one kind of, I wasn't really sure about it because Crystal Merchant does end up drawing that extra card, and I feel like card draw is very crucial to the Quest Druid. But looks like he instead values to keep that Innervate. What does he want to hold this Innervate for?
He wants to hold it for a power turn, right? If he goes for the Crystal Merchant this turn, one, it lines up right into the Seal Fate turn. It gives Blyze a perfect excuse to use Seal Fate plus the dagger hit. And two, it's his plays beyond that would have been a lot tougher, right? He would Crystal Merchant, Innervate, cool. He'd be on 3 mana the following turn, which would mean that he wouldn't be able to play any of the cards in his hand. He had a 3-drop, a 3-drop, and nothing else. So he'd be subject to hero powering. So he just wants to kind of line it up to where once the turns actually start to matter a little bit more, that he won't have a dead turn.
That's totally valid. And you see that, even though Answer might have, in retrospect, would have loved to use hero power to maybe clear off some of these threats on the board, the quest is done on turn 4. So Answer should have the ability to start doing some big things with cards like Starfall.
Starfall will kill 4 minions, which means that if Answer wanted to, he could Floop's Glorious Gloop, Innervate, Starfall, Anubis Defender, and War Druid Lodi.
And have 1 mana left over?
And have 1 mana left over to do, whatever he wants. Nothing.
Crystal Merchant. If he had that Crystal Merchant still on the board, yeah.
Yeah, I wonder what the play is going to be, since it seems like Starfall's lined up here. And if he uses his Starfall now, then Floop's Glorious Gloop all of a sudden has less value. But this allows him to hold on his Innervate, maybe get out Cenarius a turn earlier, maybe make a more powerful play if he draws Cenarius off the top, things like that. But this is a crucial point, and I wonder if he wants to kind of make the most powerful play he can right now, or hold back a little bit and just kind of see what Blyze has.
Yeah, or is there even secret option number 3, which is to do something completely different and wait for Starfall to get even more value?
Yes. Yeah, I was going to mention that next. Is just Lodi and hold and see if Blyze extends anymore, and then go for, the big play.
Oh. Well, Boom Pistol Bully doesn't affect Druid very much, given that Druid doesn't have too many Battlecry cards in their deck. That being said, this is still an intimidating board in terms of stat line. And now, how much mana are we going to get? Oh, wow. Hold on. There's bees into the mix, TJ.
Oh, Floop and bees. It's the dream.
Okay, so there's 6 minions on the opponent's side. That means if he Starfalls, he'll gain a mana. If he bees, he also gains a mana. So that means he's positive 2 extra mana on his usage of Floop and bees. If he has 2 extra mana, wait, he can trade into the Micro Mummy and then play the other 3-drop. So he can pretty much play almost his entire hand except for Hidden Oasis and Cenarius. He also can just go for Hidden Oasis if he doesn't want to use Starfall here.
This is quite insane. The Floop tech.
The Floop tech is pretty nuts.
He could Hidden Oasis his his Lodi.
That's even
play
better.
the Anubis Defender.
Right. No, I totally miscounted that. Oh, wait. Okay. Just heal back up to 30. That makes sense too.
That's fair. Yeah. He doesn't have any more spells in his hand, so I don't know how much value like healing the Lodi has. Maybe he's thinking about whether or not he should have traded into the Micro Mummy instead of the Stampede Kodo for the threat of Ziliax. But I don't think that's that big of a deal, since it doesn't make anything line up better, right? He could like dagger and trade into the Anubis Defender, but he'd want to kill the Lodi anyway. But when you make a play like that, you're always second guessing it, right? Because he floated a
Right.
mana, and he's probably thinking to himself, maybe I didn't have to float a mana there, or maybe I could have had a little bit more stats on board, you know?
Yeah, like for example, did he need to bees perhaps? Maybe, because then he wouldn't be able to get as easy trades with the Starfall. So yeah, those kinds of situations are very tricky to say because, you know, like you said, floating a mana doesn't feel great. And perhaps if he did flow that mana, did he perhaps play a little inefficiently? Well, the Goblin Lackey gives an opportunity for Blyzer to immediately trade onto the board. I was kind of debating whether or not you want to take out the War Druid Lodi because the spell damage is pretty threatening. But, you know, if your opponent has spell power, they don't really need spell power to clear your board. Oh, another War Druid Lodi. Okay. And I guess this plus the Living Dragon Breath.
Yeah, it sets up if Answer doesn't draw anything else worthwhile off the top, he has scenarios to try and punish if Blyze doesn't go for or doesn't have something big. But this is an awkward hand for Blyze. He can't play. He had the opportunity to go for a massive Edwin, but couldn't play it because there's he had to use the Leroy to clear it. He could still go for a massive Edwin, but it's not going to be quite as potent considering he has to use every card to do it.
Yeah, he is all in on Edwin, but he's already seen both War Druid Lodi and the generated one through the Worthy Expedition. Oh, wow. Although TNCAnswer does have the scenarios in the innervate, so instead of the Worthy Expedition finding potentially another War Druid Lodi, I think he's just going to take the guarantee here and push. Kronk's
okay.
Dragonhoof. Oh my goodness.
It's only at its second level of Invoke, but that's still 2 cards for free.
Yes.
But it's a matter of how much can Answer develop here.
Ooh, okay. Some big boys are entering the fight. Oasis Surgers, Ancients of War. Is there a case for Tending Torian? Doesn't have enough mana to do it. Not to mention that there's, you know, he's got this Edwin that he probably wants to kill.
Tending Torian does allow him to trade over the Kronks with his Cenarius.
It's true. Becomes a 6/9.
Yes.
Nice.
But Ancient of War would just give him like a nice, not very clean. It's a very dirty way to take out the Edwin, forcing him to attack, forcing him to hit his head against a tree and die.
Does he want to double trade into this Edwin right now? Just straight up? You can Oasis Surger.
I guess just go wide and set up for Tending Torian to kind of pull you back, right?
Okay. I mean, he's not on threat of dying as far as he knows.
He's seen Leroy, so that's a huge amount of burst that he no longer has to worry about.
Shadow
Oof.
Step. Oh, it already cost 0.
He can reset his Edwin, so to speak.
Okay.
Or like bring back Kronks to try and help stabilize him in the game.
It's true, but Cross can't get played this turn because it discounts the 4 mana.
Yeah. But he could load it up.
A ton of Druid stats come onto the board here. Blythe trying to fight back and maintain control. Finds Nat Bay. And just has to trade. Answer very unhappy to see that Shadow Step because he knows that that means his board is not going to stay around. Oh, this Rising Winds pair. Wait, but he knows that Kronks is in the hand. Finds Starfall, number 2.
I honestly think it's an awkward situation, right? Because Kronks ends up being flexible in this situation. If TNC trades down the board, or or if he like Starfalls to push through, his board gets removed by Kronks. If he tries to trade down the board to play around Kronks AoE, then Kronks is just going to summon a big dragon that he no longer can get through. So he has to find a balance, and I think just like going for Rising Winds and then trading minions off the board is probably the best. That way he can keep Starfall for a little bit later. He can also go with a play that forces Blyze to use Kronks in a way that like build a big enough board to force him to use AoE, so he knows what's going to happen, so he can account for it. But then your whole board gets lost. So it's kind of an awkward situation, but he's running out of time, so he's got to do something.
Yeah, I kind of like what you're talking about, which is trading some minions onto the board and force Blytcher to use things in a suboptimal way. Yep, and with these trades, Kronks hits the board. And now he can start what looks like to be one of his final charges onto the board to try to see if he can pressure Answer out of this game. Hidden Oasis.
The funny thing is, Drew doesn't really have Battlecry cards. They have combo cards. So, or not combo, choose one, excuse me.
Yeah.
They don't count as Battlecry. They count as choose one. So,
right.
Not affected by Boom Pistol Bully.
11, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 damage. But Blycha gonna continue to put on the pressure here. Just trade off into the Crystal Merchant and start pushing face. Keep this burst in hand. Ysera makes her way into the hand for Answer, but it's not really what he needs right now.
He does have a full board clear available with Starfall plus Wrath. You Starfall in the Boom Pistol Bully, trade something over into the Galakron, a Shield of Galakron, and then Wrath. So I guess you'd start with a Wrath on the Kronks.
Looks good to me.
And maybe pick up, I don't know, Power of the Wild, something that you can fill in with the rest of your mana.
Elijah is not happy to see that. Looks away. You can see that grimace really starting to take full effect onto Blyche's complexion here, as he is not happy to see this druid fight tooth and nail back for the board. He has to use his lackeys to try to fight back here. Going to the face with the kobold lackey. Answer holding up a prayer, trying to see if he can stay alive, and he wants damage to go to his face because he has Hidden Oasis. Spirit of the Dragonhawk. Oh, can Brightwing change anything here?
When you pick Brightwing from those three options, you know that
oh yeah,
it's hit the fan.
Oh yeah, it's definitely all over the place here, TJ. It's been scrappy to say the least. And now Answer puts Blythe in a check scenario. He needs to find something now to bail himself out of the situation. Dr. Morrigan!
No. Disaster.
Is there one last hope that we're not thinking about here? Restless Mummy, solid but not enough, and that's going to do it. Answer up 2-0, one game away from becoming the Masters Tour Los Angeles champion. You can see the anticipation coming over him. He's having a hard time even sitting still, TJ.
It's got to be setting in now, right? When you start to get into the games, right? When you start to actually sit down and play Hearthstone, things kind of can go away a little bit, right? The thought and the fear of like messing up or playing your best, because you're just playing Hearthstone, something you've done thousands of times at this point. But when a game is over, when you've won and it sets in, I'm 2-0 up in the finals of a big event. I just have to win with this last deck. Then that's when your mind starts to jumble up and you start to have those big nerves. So it just comes down to the Holy Wrath Paladin, and this was the deck that we kind of pointed out as maybe the weak spot. But he's touted as a Holy Wrath Paladin expert. He's piloted it now to a finals. He's won twice with it already today in the quarterfinals and in the semifinals. So if there's now a time to show how much of a Holy Wrath Paladin expert he is, it's right now.
Yes, when he is on tournament point. And I gotta say, Answer's been playing phenomenally. I think his flexible play and his very decisive, but yet cautious, like he cautiously and carefully plans a lot of his lines of play in situations where I feel like it's fairly obvious what to do, except he's not taking the obvious lines. He's deviating. And I think that his reasoning and the payoff are lining up beautifully. A lot of times you see like these really clever lines of play, but they don't work out. The person dies, and like, well, I can totally see what you're going for. And had your opponent not had like the absolute stone cold nuts, it would have worked out. But it's always such a rewarding moment. And I mean, honestly, that's kind of what most people enjoy most about Hearthstone is when you can find the unintuitive or the unusual lines of play, or the one tech card that other people were underestimating, or the one deck and class that people say is bad, etc. And I think that Answer's doing all of that. And that's such a impressive win on a multitude of levels.
It's just not something we get to see very often, right? Our hopes are usually dashed very early on, where we look at a top 8 or a top 16 or a big tournament, and we see a player who went against the grain and brought something really cool. They never win, Dan.
Yeah.
Always lose.
I would say always, like for example, the tale of two lineups in the World Championships back in 2019. The one happened in Taipei. Hunter Ace brought a control shaman, which was super janky and weird. No one else really had something like that. And he ended up getting a big win with that, and Dragon Summoner Mage. And then on the other end, you have Killin' All Day, who brought Chef Nomi Priest when it mattered the most, and he got completely wiped on the floor. So, sometimes it pays off in huge spades, and then sometimes you crash and burn, and live forever in the memoirs of TJ Sanders.
I don't know. I've come to expect it at this point, but hey, he's still one of the Killen's still one of the front runners for America's Grandmasters promotion.
Oh
so
yeah,
I'll hold on to that hope until the bitter end, Dan.
Speaking of the bitter end, a man that needs no introduction at this point in Hearthstone. Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Mr. Van Cleef. Turn 288. You deal with it. Back over to you, Paladin.
Where's the subdue when you need it?
Yeah. And, Answer kind of anticipated this. And quite frankly, like Blycha, this is like one of the ways he can win this matchup very convincingly is through stuff like this.
One of the cards on this board is going to the Hall of Fame. One of the cards on this board is not going to the Hall of Fame. Guess which one it is.
One of these cards are going to the Hall of Fame, and one of these cards are Edwin Van Cleef.
But you just have timeout. He has Shrink Ray. This would be a very early timeout usage if he were to do it. I don't even know. I think he just has to accept that this Edwin's going to deal a lot of damage to him.
Oh, one card off. Does he have to, though? It's not just Edwin damage, just 4 more damage with it. And when you compare 8 out of 21 versus 12 out of 21 life, that's a very big difference. You're reducing, that's 50% more damage. I agree with this. I think Answer might have to time out here, and he chooses to do so. This is not an ideal situation whatsoever, but you do have Shrink Ray, and timeout's rarely going to give you a lot more life than 12 to 15, right? That's usually what you're kind of trying to freeze anyways for. So this is a good move here by Answer, I think, long term.
Yeah, it's going to open up his options for the next few turns for sure. It's just a matter of, can he stop the bleeding before it gets out of control? And the rough thing about this matchup is, if you want any hope of winning, you can't really play Shirvala until, one, you've seen Flick, which never happens. You never see Flick before you play Shirvala. Or 2, you're killing your opponent. Or you're absolutely desperate enough to where you can risk your Shirvala getting flicked. That you have to play it, right? So he can't use that for burst healing to try and come back into it, but does have some tools to try and stall until then.
Not many though, and Blycha is on a warpath. He has 7 showing with only 10 remaining. A difference between him and getting back onto the board.
How about an Eviscerate as well, just to add to the possible burst damage that he could do? He's just a Leroy away from winning the game right now, and that's if his board is completely cleared.
Yep. Answer immediately pulls the trigger on the second timeout. Knows that he wants his opponent to develop way more for this Wild Pyromancer inequality to come down. And Blyche just needs to build a sticky board, which is exactly what he's doing with the shot bot.
Huh.
Well, yeah, I wasn't really sure where to necessarily go with that, but Fairy Dragon does make sense. Cheaper cards to activate your combos and get your hand, just get it out of your hand. Cards like Deathwing are rarely played in like a Galakron situation because you're drawing so many cards.
Oh, Dan. I love the attack here from Answer. 1, it plays around the possibility of Leroy Shadow Step. 2, it opens up if he knows that he's going to lose the next turn. And he doesn't draw Shirvallah. He can Holy Wrath him in the face.
Yes.
And just hope that it's Shirvallah.
That is true.
I think he drew Shirvallah based on his facial expression. Nope, he drew it. Oh, here we go.
1 to 12. Drew the
Oh,
loot
here we
order.
go. 1 in 10. For the tournament right now.
Yes.
This would be for the tournament.
This would be epic. I'm not going to look
No
at his webcam. He's
Why is it
praying.
blue? Oh my goodness.
Please, RNG this one time. Blackton knows what's happening.
Oh,
He's
geez.
rotating on his chair.
I'm stressed. I can't handle it. Just do it. He's going to wait till the rope.
Oh, yeah. Saying his last prayer. Holy Wrath. Okay, 2 damage.
Oh my goodness.
And with that, that's going to do it. Blycha is going to close it out with that Eviscerate. A very exciting moment there, but in the end, just can't be denied with this rogue because there's too much pressure. And as we know, it's a tough matchup to say the least. When you have to play timeout on turn 4 because Edwin Van Cleef came out, that's a position that I would say most decks would struggle with, but none more than combo-oriented decks that need timeout to get to that inevitability.
And at the end of it all, he still had a 1 in 10 out for lethal. So,
yeah, it was 90-10 at that point.
Yeah, and I actually do like how he sequenced that. You know, he played the Prismatic Lens first. Obviously, that has the risk of drawing Shirvallah, but it does one of 2 things, right? If you do draw Shirvallah, you can play it because it'd be switched with a spell that's cheap enough to where you could just play it onto the board. And at that point, he'd be dead anyway. So you don't care about flick, you just want to survive. 2, if he doesn't draw Shirvallah, then it increases the odds that he wins with Holy Wrath. So it's just proper sequencing at the end, and I loved that TNCAnswer set up for it, right? He saw what his play would have been, he saw how far behind he was, and he said, I'm going to attack with the True Silver Champion so he can't Titanic Lackey and block that damage. I'm going to give myself an out to win.
That does make sense. So now we turn to another class that might give Holy Wrath Paladin some problems. Hunter is very good at dealing with Holy Wrath Paladin because the Paladin really wants to stop the board-based damage, and Hunter is a class that excels at dealing damage straight from their hand without needing a minion to be established on board first. You contrast that with, say, the Combo Priest that Blycha has. Blycha's Combo Priest has pretty much no damage from the hand, versus the Hunter, which has Kill Command and Corrosive Breath, Storm Hammer, Hero Power, Leroy Jenkins. The list goes on and on and on. The Dragon Highlander Hunter is quite fearsome, and also it has a pretty nasty curve. If you're talking about like cards that are hard to deal with, Fairy Dragon is something that we pointed out earlier, as well as the Evasive Fellwing. If you get those early on and Paladin does not have cards like True Silver Champion, it might be super difficult for them to try to handle a minion like that.
Yeah, honestly, if you look at the deck lists, the Highlander Hunter pretty much has every card that you'd find in Dragon Hunter. It just has one of it. So it can still curve out like Dragon Hunter can. It just has additional utility along the way. with Zephyrus and late game Dino Tamer Brand and Dragon Queen Alexstrasza. So it still has the mean curve that like Dragon Hunter's known for and the ability to snowball. But it also has Zephyrus to sometimes bail you out of a situation that you'd fall behind, too far behind in the mid game, or to get that a little bit of additional burst damage that you need to win. So I'm not surprised to see like Highlander Hunter be more represented in the top 8.
Yeah, I would say that Highlander Hunter, specifically the Dragon build, gets kind of like the best of both worlds at the cost of consistency. But the consistency doesn't really matter too much in smaller sample sizes like a tournament, and it is a small sample size even though you play 9 rounds plus whatever you make in the top 8. But the Highlander Hunter is harder to target because they have so much more versatility than the Dragon Hunter that plays a lot of 2-ofs. The Dragon Hunter, once you commit to the board and once you kind of lose your momentum, it's very difficult to get it back. Versus Highlander Hunter has these comeback cards or cards that just change the entire landscape of the game. One of them being Dino Tamer Brand. But even some of these newer cards like Dragonbane, sometimes like just Hunter hits a tipping point where they just have so much damage and they just start going on the offensive. And I feel like the recovery of the Highlander Hunter gives it that versatility that you're looking for in tournaments.
Yeah, I think that's well said, and a good reason why we see more of it, especially at the top level. But one thing I wanted to point out, Dan, it is currently about 5 p.m. in Southern California. It is depending on where in China, but assuming sort of the east-ish coast, it's 8 a.m. in China, and it's almost 1 a.m. in France.
Oof.
So these are some brutal times for both these players to be playing. It's not like they've been just starting now. Both these players had to show up 8 hours ago for their first quarterfinal, or roughly around that time for the first quarterfinal. So
yeah, why'd you win so much, idiot?
I know, right?
Yeah. I mean, Blyche, that could be a thing, right? Like fatigue, because the day's been long and these players have been competing for a long time. It's been a grueling weekend, but one that, as you can tell, has immense payoff. I think with this final spot, Blyche is pretty much guaranteed a spot in Grandmaster. It's going to be very hard for someone else to overtake him, if not impossible at this point, because I don't think anyone's within reaching distance. And so for him, I was kind of saying that he's taking a victory lap. It's kind of like for him trying to just cement his legacy or even just get that momentum and put himself on that map as like one of the players to watch for the year. He already is a player for me to watch because it's always amazing to see people's streaks. But if he can win a second Masters Tour TJ, what a story that would be.
Yeah, and if I were a competitive player, that's what I would be chasing, right? Doing something that nobody's done before. And even though we've had back-to-back champions at certain events, I mentioned earlier on, like Firebat in 2015, the year after he won the World Championship, won back-to-back Gfinities, which was a relatively large tournament back in the day. But it's hard to top this level where you have a tournament that you have to qualify for in an open event. And then all the players that won those open events get put into a giant bracket. That's 9 rounds of Swiss and then a single elimination top 8, not even double elimination. And to win 2 of those back-to-back is just being insane.
Yeah, we've had some incredible streaks in the past, and this is no exception. Blyche continue to put on that pressure. Now, on the other side, we've been kind of talking about Blyche for the past few minutes. Answer does have a lot of game because it doesn't seem like Blyche is running away with the game just yet. Although this Dragonbane that goes unanswered, that's going to start putting out a ton of damage that you don't really expect. If you underestimate Dragonbane and you let it survive for a couple turns, it's already done a Pyroblast worth of damage as an added bonus. If you also do respect Dragonbane and love it, boy, do I have a legendary spell for the Demon Hunter class for you. Metamorphosis does kind of some of the same thing, which is it can help transform your hero power to deal 5 damage twice and really end the game there. So Dragonbane, very much a threat right now. And Answer needs to figure out how to respond to this.
I honestly think the best way for him to answer it might be to try and Holy Wrath it, right? It's full mana utilization. It gets his Shrivala discounted more. And, even though it doesn't have the greatest chance to kill it, it would have to be second Holy Wrath or Shrink Ray. It gets the mana out of the way. But now is when it's starting to get a little rough, because this Evasive Worm is going to be hard to answer. And Blaize has Dino Tamer Brand in hand. So Answer's looking at a lethal potential staring back at him if he doesn't, block this in some way, which he does have timeout, so...
Just looks so tough. Just looks so tough when you're on the defensive end. And this is probably like a deck that Answer was hoping not to face against. But, Priest and Hunter, two problematic classes, and chose to go for the statistical ban. But when Hunter is crushing you like this, no pun intended on turn 7, it does feel like, why did I ever let this deck go through? Time out. On average, Answer's been playing timeout on like turn 4 every game. Turn 4 to turn 5. That's just how that's the average.
Oh, okay. I was thinking whether or not he was going to try and dig with his Accolade of Pain, or use the to get rid of the Divine Shield.
Mm-hmm.
Getting rid of the Divine Shield means that if he draws like Consecration, he can get rid of this Evasive Worm.
Right.
But
yeah, tried to go for the snipe on the Acolyte with the Dragonbane power. Ends up attaching the Ziliax with Divine Shield. Clearly, he sees that Answer is fishing for an opportunity to use Pyromancer to clear things with a Shrink Ray or a Equality. And Answer was setting up that possibility, and now Blycha kept his Dragonbane alive through Magnetic ability. That's a nice hidden bonus on the Dragonbane. Most people just put it in for the damage, but you do have that ability to magnetize it with Ziliax. And also fish it out with Ursatron if you choose to play those lists.
Oh boy.
Okay, so what can we do in this situation?
Flash of Light into Shrink Ray or second timeout. That's about it.
Yep, doesn't have a Holy Wrath out here, it looks like. Flash of Light. Finds a Pyromancer. It's not going to be enough. Holy Wrath just on a 2-3. Oh, doesn't even kill it. 11, 13, 20. Yeah, that's just way too much damage. King Crush or Dragonbane going to end it. Blycha ties it up. 2 quick games. And Answer, even though he's up to a 2-0 lead, it now comes down to the final game to determine it all and crown a champion here for Masters Tour Los Angeles.
Oh man, of course it would come down to a game 5. There was only 2 ways that this series was going to end: either game 5 or Answer would have hit that 1 in 10 in the previous game. Those are the only 2 ways.
Yeah, and it comes down to a matchup that is pretty obscure and rare in terms of how often you'll see it on ladder. There's not many times you'll see Highlander Mage go up against OTK Paladin on ladder. In fact, I don't think I've ever seen it myself this expansion. But the matchup isn't nearly as one-sided as you might think, given that the Mage is traditionally a control deck, and you would expect the Holy Wrath Paladin to be favored versus it. But Mage actually still puts up a pretty good fight just based off the data. Now, that being said, I think that's largely because a lot of those mages on ladder run cards like Mountain Giant. And I think that, now that Mountain Giant's kind of been phased a little bit more out of competition and more people are playing things like Amazing Reno to try and have that definitive control tool, I wonder if there's another way for Mage to get that victory outside of that early game pressure now that Mountain Giant's not in the deck lists.
Yeah, it's tough. One of the reasons why Holy Wrath Paladin came into the meta like late last year was because to beat mages, right? It was to beat Cyclo mages.
Right. Oh, I actually, hold on, TJ. I apologize. I didn't scroll down far enough for the Blyge's deck list. He does have a Mountain Giant And we did see it in the semifinals as well. I was misremembering him versus the Bank Yugi deck list. So he does have that Mountain Giant, which does play a big factor if he can get it out early. And as we saw, Edwin Van Cleef very quickly can end that Paladin's life in the same way. If you're able to get that Mountain Giant, Conjurer's Calling, and the opponent can't respond to it, that is an opportunity. But outside of that, I still feel like Holy Wrath Paladin has the edge over the Mage.
Yeah, there's pretty much no data. I went to Aegis Replay and tried to look up on the latest patch. There's only been 100 games recorded of Holy Wrath Paladin versus Highlander Mage, and that's across every rank. So this does not happen. This matchup rarely happens on ladder. I don't think outside of maybe some testing. I'm sure TNCAnswer's played a ton of this matchup because I'm sure he was assuming that Mage would be a popular bring. With Luna's Pocket Galaxy in the opening hand for Blyze, that is definitely what you want to see.
Yeah, although I would say that Luna's Pocket Galaxy does require a couple of other things. You would definitely want that Dragon Caster, and you want some card draw in your hand too. You want to get like Arcane Intellect, and maybe not even play Arcane Intellect on 3. That's kind of how much I value those Pocket Galaxy combos against a slow deck, like Holy Wrath Paladin here. But we'll see how it continues to develop. For now, Answer, he has a ton of card draw in his hand. Crystology, Prismatic Lens, picks up that Blood Mage Thalnos. Oh, this is not the start you're looking for if you're the mage.
Not at all.
It's way too slow.
If he gets a Mountain Giant, though.
Yes, if he hits Mountain Giant, then we're starting to cook with gas. That's a big if. Okay.
Oh, Bone Wraith is playable. That's a bonus.
We are definitely compromising, to say the least, if we're happy to see Bone Wraith. But hey, a minion's a minion, and at least you're getting something started here.
Yeah.
On the opposite end, there is a lot of validity to like just playing minions to stop any kind of early game damage. Ooh.
Oh,
he picks up Fireball.
Yeah, surprise damage. I like that, honestly.
Okay. I can buy it. Yeah. Direct damage does make sense, right? Against a deck that if you can put him low enough and then there's no minions on board, you can just burn him. And so we now have the opportunity for the Pocket Galaxy. Blige has been setting up for this very moment, and Answer knew that it was a possibility going into it. So both players kind of hitting their early game conditions, getting that very powerful legendary spell that discounts all those minions to 1 mana. And on the opposite end, for Answer, he's drawing through his deck very efficiently so far. So both players off to a reasonable start, although Blige, I would argue, had a rougher start here, considering that he didn't have any early game minions besides that Bone Wraith.
So, is there any 1 health minions even left in the deck?
There might be another
Novice Engineer.
Yeah.
Okay, because he's played Blood Mage. He has Elven Archer in hand. He's played a Loot Hoarder and a Novice Engineer.
Right.
So yeah, there is one. Emptying his hand enough to where he won't overdraw going into the next turn. Good recognition.
And you know what? He does have Book of Spectre, so in hindsight, this Malygos Fireball looks smarter with each passing turn by Blige. He's not running into card draw issues whatsoever. He needs to find a way to end the game. Answer picks up his second Holy Wrath, needs to find a way to get that Shrivala discounted. Holy Wrath's the face. He's so willing to throw away this card just so he can get that discount going and also keep his card draw engine going. He's down to 7 cards before you've even reached turn 9.
That's insane.
That's silly.
But this game's going to ramp up very quickly. The good thing for Blyze is that is going to be able to get this Alexstrasza on board without like any type of real threat from Answer, but he has both timeouts. He's got to kind of navigate these last few turns in a way where he can guarantee with all of his card draw that he'll be able to win the game. Another thing to keep in mind is if There's Fireball plus Zephyrus plus 5 mana. That Fireball is 8 damage. So
you're right. Actually, he has 4 mana left because it'll be turn 9. So he has Zephyrus.
It's still Fireball. It's still lethal.
Yes. That would be 14 damage if he doesn't attack with the True Silver, TJ. He goes up to 15 life.
So this is a crucial turn. Blyze is kind of holding his breath here because he's holding back this surprise burst damage. Turn 9 is not a turn that you'd expect to die against Highlander Mage in most cases. But we'll see if he attacks. Oh, did he attack? He did attack.
Looks like he get to commit to the attack. That attack is so crucial. He's going to stay alive by 1 HP. Unless I'm misremembering the options that Zephyr can give you for 4 mana remaining. Is there something more that can be offered?
No. He could play Twilight Drake, Fireball, Zephyrus, and get an Edwin.
I think he wants to keep that damage in the hand. Power of creation.
Oh, I thought that was hard for a second. Oh my goodness. He could have gotten Reckless Rocketeer.
Right.
Or Archer Commander. Both would have been lethal.
Yeah, and the good thing is that now he can get that ping and put his opponent down to 14. But now Answer is in that critical range of using timeouts to freeze all damage and make his hero immune. Shivala is pretty much there. And Boom Pistol Bully had been committed by Blycha. And I think Blycha threw down his Boom Pistol Bully because he wanted to give no opportunity for Answer to have a 1 in 5 for the shuffle, or actually a 1 in 6 rather. But there's still timeouts, and I do have to think if this was the right amount of pressure and the right timing for Boom Pistol Bully, or was it a little bit premature? And I think that time will tell. But right now, this timeout is going to come out for sure. And I think if I'm Answer, I'm also thinking about just dropping card draw like Acolyte of Pain. He did have an opportunity to also draw an extra card with the Pyromancer, but then he would lose his ability to combo with the Shrink Ray.
Yeah, and I think that's the no-no right there. Oh my gosh, Gyrocopters with Snip Snaps. Not that it really matters.
Very smart. Using Conjurer's Calling on the Acolyte to deny its card draw. Acolyte says whenever it takes damage, but if it says destroy a minion, then Acolytes will not draw a single card. No damage to the face. Part of me wonders if Blycha should even consider playing things like Caligos to try to get Counterspell and play it with that later on in the game. But I think that's more of a Hail Mary attempt instead of something that you usually rely upon.
Oh my goodness. This is going to come down to the wire. Crystology, I don't think will draw anything.
Right, because we saw almost every one of these cards.
Yeah, we've seen everything that Crystology would pick up, I believe. So 4 cards remain.
He has 2 attempts. He could go for... Oh, no, he has 1 attempt. Because he used that Holy Wrath earlier. If he had 2 Holy Wraths, he could go for a Shirvala, Baleful Banker timeout, and then try to see if he uses a 2nd Holy Wrath later on. But that might be too much.
He could go for like a Shirvala Sathravar. He'd get 1 more Shirvala or 2 more Shirvalas. He could clear off the Gyrocopter. That'd still be too much damage because he'd be worried about like Zephyrus Bloodlust because he'd have to leave this Gyrocopter with Wind Fury up, one of them up.
Right.
He could Wild Pyromancer timeout
and then Shrink Ray.
But then that's like 2 big removals or like 2 big stalls that he'd have to use.
It's at a time. He has to decide. He ends up going for the Pyromancer Shrink Ray. This was... I can't tell if this was the right strategy, given that he could have popped the Tiamat, but I think he wanted all of the minions to survive. And Blycha's going to play the Reno, destroying his own minions so things can't be rushed into.
And the second timeout's been used.
The second time has been used. 2 Baleful Bankers in hand, TJ.
And he has lethal next turn with the Fireball plus Zephyrus. So he destroyed all his minions purposefully, not to gain the 5 armor, just to destroy his minions to prevent Shirvallah from being able to get healing to heal him out of lethal. So Answer right now, his only opportunity to win is Shirvallah, Baleful Banker, and then go for a 2 and 5, so a 40% chance to win the game.
How has it come down to this where Answer can't guarantee his victory? Instead, he has to shuffle 2 copies of Shirvallah into his deck. He's racking his brain for another line. Is there an alternative? Is this too early to pull a trigger? Can he stall for one last turn? And Blyzes, he is on the edge of his chair. He is sending prayers to his gods.
Dan, that's also assuming that Answer even thinks that 14 is the range. He saw the Malagos, so he knows there's a Malagos spell. He can be pretty confident there's Zephyrus.
Yeah.
And with time running out, I don't think that he.
Oh no! Oh no! The Sarthravar Answer is going to bank on Blyzes not having the damage, and look at the elation from Blyzes. He knows he has that game-ending damage, unless Reno messed it up, and that is going to do it. The first time in Hearthstone history, a back-to-back Masters Tour champion, Blyzes from France, will take home the Masters Tour Los Angeles Championship.
Just incredible. I mean, I kind of joked at the beginning of the day about the potential of a back-to-back champion because it just seems so far out of the realm of possibility, right? We haven't even had that many Masters Tours. They're hard to qualify to. And even through that, like 9 rounds of Swiss, there was more players on this one since it was online and more players were able to play. 350, a single limb top 8. To do it twice is just incredible.
Right. To do it twice,
big congratulations.
Do it back to back, TJ. Like that is just absurd. Now, granted, Blyzes did automatically qualify after you do a certain performance in Swiss. You are guaranteed to go to the next Masters Tour. But I gotta say, this is unprecedented, and that is an amazing feat. 2 times we've had Masters Tours in 2020, and 2 times Blyzes has won. That is special, and his spot in Grandmaster is well deserved, and I think that at least for today, the moment truly does belong to him. Well played.
Yeah, over the past 2 months, Blyzes has made $65,000 in Hearthstone winnings. First place at Arlington, first place at LA. It's just amazing, and the fact that this guarantees that he will be promoted to Grandmasters post season 1 means that his year for Hearthstone has the potential to be just that much more incredible. So a big shout out to him. This is something that we may never see again in Masters Tours,
right?
Which is a back-to-back winner. We might never even see another player who's won a Master Tour win one again. It's just incredible.
Yes. It is so hard to repeat as champion. It's only been done a few times in all of competitive Hearthstone. And you've seen some people who have, done well in multiple events. We talked about Bunny Hopper winning a seasonal championship, then coming back the following season, getting second. Bloodyface was kind of in that zone as well, getting second and then top 4. We've seen players go really deep in tour stops in 2018. We've seen Pavel almost make it from a world championship back to a championship after his run. But no one's been able to close that gap and go back to back in quite the same fashion with this much at stake, with this kind of competition, TJ. And it's kind of like what you said. We might never see something like this in our lifetime again, because we very much understand that in a game of variance, this is very difficult to achieve. But, with a lot of preparation, which I think was the key to success, and a little bit of luck, and of course, a lot of experience and some technical skill, I think Blyzes has defied all the expectations. And I think a huge congratulations is in order for this young man. I think he has done so well, and I can't wait to see him compete in Grandmasters.
Absolutely. Did it with a reverse sweep as well, which is probably one of the toughest positions to be in. But I feel like, we can't end the show without giving a shout out to TNCAnswer. Of course, his Paladin came up short at the end, but he gave us some really exciting moments. And just the fact that he made it into the finals with a deck that was on nobody's radar and kind of came out of nowhere himself, not being as well known, at least, over here in the West. definitely a great showing from him, and I very expressive too. I hope that he continues competing where he can in Masters Tour events and in the system over here, because it's always exciting to see representation.
Oh, yeah.
We had all 4 regions represented in the top 8, almost an even split, which is pretty crazy.
Yes. A lot of storylines heading into this. We've had multiple Grandmasters, also newly minted Grandmasters. We had some challenge to the throne. We've had the reigning global champion, but, perhaps the darkest horse out of all those no names was Blycha for being able to repeat as champion. So definitely, a special moment in our young games competitive history. Now, I know normally we'd like to do interviews and talk to the winner, but again, we are very technically limited given that we had just over 24 hours to prepare for this tournament. And we're barely keeping together as things are, as some of the people who've been watching all day very faithfully have seen. So we will be posting a post-tournament interview with Blycha on social media, which I'm sure you should definitely go follow him, as he is a xBlyzes HS on Twitter. TJ, let's go ahead and get some final thoughts here on this tournament. I know we said a lot already, but any straggling thoughts here to wrap up the day and the weekend?
Basically, I just want to thank everybody for tuning in. I know it's not quite as polished as our normal broadcasts are. You didn't get to see mine and Dan's or Doa and Heatwave's faces throughout the event, except for the ones that were on these cool cards that we put together. But thanks for everybody who's tuned in. We really appreciate it, and of course, shout out to everybody behind the scenes that worked on the show, because it was less than 48 hours between the time we realized we had to get out of the studio, not broadcast it, stay at home, and do it online. To be able to turn that around and get something in front of everybody is a great achievement. So shout out to them, and of course, big congratulations to Blyze. Again, I'm just amazed, and I think I'll be amazed for some time at what he's achieved today. Back-to-back Masters Tour victories, something that we may never see again. So congratulations to Blyze.
Well said, TJ. Well said. If you missed any part of this broadcast, make sure to check out all of the Hearthstone Esports stuff over at youtube.com/HS Esports, or even just check out all the stuff on Hearthstone. There's a lot of announcements for Year of the Phoenix. This is just the beginning of the year for Hearthstone, as we have lots to look forward to. Ashes of Outland coming out already in spoiler season, already showing you just what's to come. And I'm really excited to see, how this year concludes. With all of the new expansion, given that the year of the dragon has almost wrapped up here. So make sure to go to playhearthstone.com for all your updates, as well as to check out all the stats, deck list standings, and etc. In the meantime, this has been Frodan and TJ casting the Hearthstone Masters Tour Los Angeles, presented by T-Mobile. Want to give a shout out to Doa and Heatwave as well, who's joined us this weekend, as well as you, the viewer, who tuned in, despite the fact that we've had some setbacks. On the last note, I'd like to once more, for people who are out there, to encourage them to stay safe. We're currently experiencing an unprecedented global pandemic. Please take this matter seriously. It is an issue that far transcends our own personal desires, needs, and expectations. And there are millions, if not billions, of lives that could be at stake. So please do your research, stay well informed, and also stay inside, as I know I will be playing lots of video games.
Amen.
Today and years to come. All right, that's it. See you guys later. More Hearthstone next time.